Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the interesting session. So, before we actually jump into the topic, a brief thing. On an ISCCM Hyderabad platform, as you know, we'll be regularly conducting the Meet the Master series where senior pioneers in the field and important opinion leaders in the field, they'll be like guiding the students. So, this was an important step taken by us since 1 year. And as a part of it, we have a students' corner as well. So today the topic was a very different topic, but altogether a very important topic. So how do you actually speak effectively, and how do you present yourself? We thought over seeing many presentations, so we really thought that this is one of the very important topic to be done. And none other than our own Sai sir. So I work with Sai sir, and Sai Praveen Haranath sir is a very senior consultant. He is certified, board certified both in pulmonology and critical care from America, and we are closely associated at our Apollo Hospital as well. And in fact, I think there is no need to go in depth about it. He is a well-known publisher, and more importantly, a very important teacher for us and close person to me. So without much ado, I would like to give the session to the Sai sir. Sai sir, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Deepak. Thank you all for joining in. Thank you to the platform for allowing us to participate. And thank you again to ISCCM for allowing us to present these topics, which are very important. And I think today's theme is a little general, but I think it'll make a big difference. You can follow some very simple rules when you're presenting or talking. Because ultimately, it's all about communication, whether communication at home with your parents, your wife, your kids, or communication at the workplace with your patients or your colleagues. It's very important that you communicate effectively as well as directly and also in a way that makes sense to the other person. Early cavemen, as you know, you can find these paintings and drawings. They were drawing scenes of hunting. And even now, several hundreds of thousands of years later, we can kind of get an idea what they were talking about. Now, likewise, when you're talking in front of a group of people, it's very important for you to make sure that the other person is listening and you're also interacting with the group that is in front of you. When you make presentations especially, you need to make sure that people are going to listen to it and you're going to convey an idea through the presentation. Today's talk is mostly about some very simple principles you can actually learn right away. And it's worked for me for over 25 years now in terms of using these principles. I used to enjoy public speaking in school and college, but ultimately what I've realized is that the essence of what you speak comes from the heart. So if you understand what you're talking about, if you understand the audience, you can convey the message, and actually the slides don't matter. You really don't need any slides. As long as you can talk to people directly, heart to heart, eye to eye, it makes a big difference. And I'll talk to you very specifically about all this. Many books have been written about this topic. There have been a lot of research has been done. Many people find public speaking as one of their number one fears, even more than scorpions and spiders or jumping out of a plane. People feel that speaking in front of a group is actually kind of tenses people up. You check the heart rates of people. You can do a very quick DNB study on just looking at heart rates of people before the presentations. So I think one of the issues which I would suggest you do today is try to listen. I'm thinking this presentation will be recorded. Some of these slides can be shared too. And most of them are original. There's a little bit of mixing and mashing I've done. And I'll show you some interesting things I've tried to do. One thing I'd like to do every time I give a talk is to learn something new. I also try my best to stick to time. I also try to make sure that my diction is clear, that I'm not slurring on my words like that. You want to really speak clearly. And I also want to speak slowly. So these are just some general principles. And what I'm going to show today is not really new. You will remember listening to certain teachers in your medical school or wherever you studied. You'll remember some high school teachers or even your school teacher. I remember my history teacher. I remember certain people in my pharmacology class, very distinct like it was yesterday, because they were very clear in what they spoke. They're very organized in how they shared things, and they made it very interesting for the audience and whoever was listening to them. So those are some of the tips you need to use. And these principles apply whether you're doing a DNB presentation or a regular class or a business presentation, or even if you're doing, simple boring things like a financial presentation with your auditor, you might need to use the same principles. So I'm going to go to one of the biggest things I want to share with you is that you need to overcome the fear. There are many ways you can overcome the fear. One of them is to practice. There are clubs in Hyderabad too and other places too called the Toastmasters, where you can practice public speaking. And of course, ultimately, it's about sharing your ideas. And once you share your ideas effectively, One, you're able to share to other people things which they may not know. In addition, when people listen to you as you speak, they will understand that, okay, you know what, this person actually knows what they're talking about, and you increase your reputational score, you increase the value of what you're saying, and ultimately, you're trying to change things in life to make it better for yourself and your patients. And those things will happen when people realize that what you're saying actually makes sense in both life and work. Now, one of the things you want to do is to hack to communicate. Time you might be in between patients, so we're going to keep it very brief. So facts and situations being dealt with by the audience. So what? Why should you care? So meaning, why should you listen to Dr. Sai Haranath, and kind of what is it going to do for you? Well, there's an important thing for you because you may have to give presentation in the future. You might already be giving presentation. You might have a talk to give tomorrow, for example. So I think you would care about a talk like this because this is going to go over some of the basics. Now, what is the next? So one of the things you need to be ready for, and this was not an intended demonstration of it, but you need to be ready for technological issues. And one of the things you want to be ready for is you want to not act flustered. You want to be confident. You want to relax because ultimately, I'm sure in the last 1 minute, you guys checked your WhatsApp or looked up stuff and you say, you know what, hey, great, cool, I got a break. But at the same time, it's important that you do prepare for connectivity issues. You do prepare for audio video issues. And right now, I have quickly switched over to an alternate network because I was thinking, if this happened, what would I do? And again, this might happen if my network changes again, the speed at which I'm talking might change. And by the way, Deepak and Rupsa, if you think the audio or the video is not coming through clearly, do let me know. So we're about a third of the way into
Okay,
the
sir,
talk.
it
And
is
so
breaking
far, if you
sometimes.
okay, but if you can hear me okay right now. So essentially what we've talked about so far is it's important that you look at what is the issue you're talking about. So what, meaning why should the audience care about it? And the next step, of course, is now what is your next step? So if you remember these 3 points, you can kind of organize your thoughts very well. And I was just sharing with you that this image on the right is done by the DALI app, and it's pretty easy to do. All I told it was make me an image of a presentation on a presentation. And I told it was happening in India, and quickly it organized this picture and kind of came up with that. Now, you need to make your slides super slides that imprint. So meaning you need to make them beautiful. And again, the images I'm showing again are totally AI created. In fact, the 2 black screens I put up there, I actually asked ChatGPT, hey, make me a presentation on effective communication. And in fact, I didn't even do that. I just uploaded the image of the talk, the flyer that went out, and said, make me a talk on this topic. It did this. Now, technology is super powerful, but the technology in the hands of a fool is still a tool. So you really want to make sure that you do it properly, meaning you use it in a way that it is useful for you, and that you make sure that whatever you're asking your what I've really said is that you can use the multiple kinds of apps that are out there, including ChatGPT, for example, to create some of your background information, but you definitely have to verify it for accuracy because a lot of errors do happen. But it can also organize your thoughts for you in many useful ways. And even for a technical talk, you can ask it for assistance. What you do want to make sure is that it sounds like you. And you can even do some settings in there to make sure that the app knows who you are. So what is important for you to realize is that you do need to make sure that you're actually making the presentation in a way that is helpful for everybody, and that you're also making sure that the presentation is helpful for the audience that is there. What I've shown through the ChatGPT example here is that I was actually able to go deeper and deeper, where the slides actually kept improving as I kept asking it more questions. So this is a quick tip for you to start using it. I'm not opposed to using digital aids as long as you're doing it yourself and you attributed that this was generated by ChatGPT. You let people know that. And in addition to that, you also make sure that the data is accurate, and you use it only as a guidepost to kind of organize your talk. And this might be helpful for people to quickly get to speed. But in terms of communicating or talking, though, it's ultimately up to you. So you need to do the speaking. You need to make sure that you're speaking in a way that is convincing. Next slide, please. So one of the next issues that I want to touch on is the fact that we have a certain number of rules that we can go through. So this is something you want to remember. One is, who are you speaking to? Meaning, who is your audience? And where are you speaking? Meaning, are you speaking at a birthday party? Are you talking at a conference? Are you talking with your friends? It's very important to set the context, as well as when are you speaking? Are you speaking in the time frame of something momentous? Are you speaking in the time frame? For example, today was inauguration of a temple in North India. So are you speaking in that context? Are people going to be actually tuning in because you're doing something at the same time? So there are many things you need to look at when you're actually speaking. The second important rule is that when you're presenting something, obviously this slide doesn't follow that rule, but 7 lines, 7 words per sentence in any slide. Do not go beyond that. Your slides should not be cramped and crowded, and absolutely do not read your slides. This is a terrible habit a lot of people have, because when you're putting a slide up, people are going to read it anyway. Obviously, don't put the font size so small that people can't see it. At the same time, don't make sure that you're not putting too much text in there, and make sure the slides you're putting in are actually adequate for people to look at, and also adequate for people to kind of ingest. And you should approximately spend a minute per slide. So for a 20-minute talk, you could probably have 18, 19 slides at the most. You definitely want to cut down. Less is more. Remember, if you're able to convey a point even better than the slide, it is even more important. So really, you don't need slides. Slides are not doing your talk. You are doing your talk. One idea per slide. So each slide that you talk about, let's take an example. You're talking about diabetic ketoacidosis. One slide can be on the fact that electrolytes can get messed up. One slide can be about hyperglycemia. One slide can be of the fact of the anion gap. One slide can be about when do you switch from a non-dextrose containing fluid to a dextrose containing fluid. And then how do you avoid over-resuscitation? Things of that sort. You can kind of go through each one point for each slide and make sure you speak slowly. In fact, not even as fast as me. I tend to speak fast, but you want to make sure that you speak as slowly as possible. And of course, again, reiterating, do not ever read your slides. And of course, if something happens, you know your speech. They don't. So you don't have to memorize things. You've seen these situations, especially in the younger years, where somebody's talking and then all of a sudden they stop and they think, oh, what was I trying to say next? What was I trying to say next? And that kind of, flusters them. Don't worry about it. You know your speech. You can very quickly pivot, and you're telling a story. The other thing that's important when you're doing in front of an audience is you do eye contact. And think of a very simple tip to eye contact in 3 locations. One is to the left side of the audience, one is to the right side of the audience, one is somebody in the middle and a little bit to the back. So establish these 3 people as your friends you're talking to in the audience. And once you start making eye contact with these 3 people, you forget that there is 1,000 people there. You're just talking to 3 people. And that's something that you can try. Of course, try to smile calmly and confidently so that people actually, it's a mimetic response. It's a neurologic response. When somebody smiles at you, you smile back, and you actually imbibe a lot of good hormones, and you actually feel better just listening to them talking. So it's very important that you try to smile, speak confidently, and of course, body language and gestures. So I don't want to do hey, I'm going to talk about this. No, you're going to do like gentle stuff. I'm not standing now, but you can keep your hands together, palms together like this, or keep your hands clasped in the back towards the back. And that you can do have some sticks. For example, they will keep touching their eyes or the glasses and things like that. Those are things you have to learn to overcome. There are medications some people use, including propranolol, just before a speech, for example, to calm nerves down. In addition to this, it's also helpful to try your best to kind of match your expressions with what you're talking about. If you're talking about somebody's success in something, be happy, be energetic. Try not to do something that is depressing, especially if you're talking to someone who's in a positive environment. Try to be energetic, try to be interactive, try to be engaging. And of course, you need to make sure that you're kind of telling a story. What you're doing really is you're telling a story of whatever you're talking about. And it's helpful to set the context in terms of how things are moving along and how you're actually telling the backstory as well as what's going to happen next and what's coming next, and keep it interesting. Just now, Netflix ends every episode at a critical point. Do the same thing with your slide, and people are waiting to see what's coming next. The other thing, of course, is that you want to make sure that when you're talking and telling a story, you also use a communication tool, just like how when you're talking in healthcare, it's called the SBAR: situation, background, assessment, and response. So in any kind of a interaction, try to use that framework in terms of describing something. So here, what am I doing? My situation is I'm talking to a bunch of students about how to talk better, how to present better. What is the background? This is a problem that is there for a lot of people. So I'm trying to see, can I make a difference to that? What is my assessment? Well, many people know how to do this. It's important enough that people want to do this, and the talk got arranged. And my response is, hey, Deepak, I'm interested in doing this. Let me get to do this. So that's SBAR response is helpful in most situations in healthcare and outside too. It's very important that you attribute the source. Many of us don't do this. Like the picture there I'm putting up there, it's a ChatGPT generated picture to a prompt that I gave. And of course, you need to tell if there's a reference, if you're pulling text off, pulling images off, always make sure you attribute the source. You also want to practice as much as possible and put as many images as possible. Try your best to do spell check, grammar check, and have one big message for your talk. And the big message for the talk is, okay, today's talk is on how do you present better? How do you be more energetic? How do you make sure that your points are conveyed? How can your slides do well? How can you speak better? And of course, you need to thank the host for the opportunity. Obviously, I thank the platform, and I've thanked Deepak for this opportunity. Dr. Deepak, again, appreciate you allowing me to share this because I think it's an important topic. Next slide, please. So one of the things to look at is to be effective and concise. And this slide here is kind of a demonstration of that. So you can clearly make out that the top line is clear. The font size is good. The font choice is good. The color is good. The second one is also not bad. It's clear and impactful. Obviously, the third line there, you can't read if you're far away. If you're in front of your computer, you might. The fourth line is also okay. It's in italics. The fifth line in yellow is obviously you can't even read it. So you want to make sure your background is good. The last, of course, is again just demonstrating that you can make it bold, you can make it less bold, but you don't want to overuse the same kind of a completely everything in bold. You don't want to be in all capitals. You also don't want to use colors like this, which are going to be bad for the background. The image on the right is something that I just picked randomly, and you want to make sure that the image is often kind of matches what you're talking about. So you want to make sure that it is clear, concise, effective, and impactful. So it's important that the actual presentation, the font use is consistent. You absolutely have to do a grammar check. You need to make sure that your presentation is world class. Because every time you talk, you might be impacting somebody. You might be affecting somebody's life. If you're talking a medical topic, you might not think about it, but you may remember that, hey, you know what, that doc told me that when I think of hypoglycemia, I need to really look at seizures. I need to think about liver failure, etc. So you want to kind of think about situations where what you're saying might actually save somebody's life. Next slide, please. So I think we've kind of covered quite a few topics, and this is a demonstration of how you can create your own infographics. There are many apps to do it, but this is something I just made using PowerPoint, using the standard squares as well as circles. And this is an algorithm to look at hypoxia, for example. So I've kind of come up with a very simple approach to looking at the PF ratio, looking at what is the history, is it an acute or chronic. So I've classified hypoxia assessment into my own way, but this is not complicated. It's kind of what you do, but this is one way to make sure that your presentation is actually both impactful, it is making sense to people to understand what you're talking about, and in addition, the font is not so bad that you're not able to see it. Next slide, please. So what we have talked about today is about speaking. We've also talked about presenting, and of course, we talked about quite a few other things in terms of how to be confident, how to be a kind of calm and not really worry about what you're saying, especially if you forget something, but also having an overview of what are the points you're going to talk about and having one big message as well as multiple small messages in between in each slide. Now, what the mind does not know, the eye does not see, and the ear does not hear. And this is the case in a lot of things in healthcare and outside healthcare. Many of us may be terrible at finances. Many of us may be bad at public speaking. Many of us may be bad at, like writing down things and making notes or writing an article, for example. But these are all things you can learn and correct and improve on. So these are not difficult to do. These are important to do. And these are the skills you want to learn now because they will help you through your career as you progress in it. I'm going to request you to go back to the fourth slide, I think, the one with the long list.
Okay, sir.
So if you want to kind of take the one with that long 23-point list. So yeah, that one, yeah, sure. The next one. So the next one. Yeah, that one. So you can kind of take a screenshot of this if you want. So for example, so these are points which I think you can think of very easily. It's remember just two things. What are you talking about? Why are you talking about it? And what next? As well as who are you speaking to? Where are you speaking? And when are you speaking? If you remember this, and as well as keeping your presentation clean and neat, not overcrowded, having enough white space, a lot of images, attributing the source, talking slowly, not rushing through, thanking the audience, and ultimately having fun when you're doing it. And I think this is something that's very easily done. Keep practicing it, and I hope to hear all of you speaking in the future. Thank you again to the team, and thank you, Deepak. Apologize for the technical glitches, but I think this is a very interesting topic, and hopefully this will be useful for all of you.
Sai sir, I think 1 to 3 students have asked a couple of questions, sir.
Yes, please.
Shall we take it, sir? So
Please.
the first question was, I'm a beginner in the field I recently joined. I think one of the student messaged me. I feel very nervous before talking to the big, big crowd. How do I need to decrease the nervousness? That is first
Sure.
question.
So there is an element of nervousness which is always good. Having a little bit of fear in any new situation is good because it keeps you on your toes, it keeps you alert, it's a sympathetic response, which is good. But if it goes beyond a little bit, then it makes you nervous and you start not remembering what you're trying to say. Slow, deep breaths, 5 of them, sitting upright, hands on your thighs, slow, deep breath in through your mouth, slow, deep breath out through your nose for about 25 seconds, 30 seconds will activate your parasympathetic nervous system and it'll calm you down. Obviously, if it's a clinical issue, then you might need to talk to somebody about taking a medication before it. But in general, you can train your mind by practicing and ultimately remember, this is just a talk. This is not the end of the world. This is not something that's going to change your life. It will, but it's not going to change your life in that moment right away. I think you need to kind of convince yourself, and practicing in front of a mirror or also practicing in front of friends is a very simple technique to do. And preparing early on, preparing your presentation early so you're not like rushing through it at the last minute. And keep a little notebook or even in your phone periodically. If you suppose you have to give a talk in a few days, start making notes of points right from an early on time frame where you can remember that, hey, you know what, I need to make those notes. And that way you can look at it when the time approaches, that you have a collection of thought processes.
Yeah. The second version was, I think, more or less same line, sir. I have too much to present, but I think too less a time. So if I'm starting to cram up too many lines and the slide doesn't look good, so how do you deal?
Sure. So I think it's a very good question. It's a very common problem. It's a tendency that you want to present everything to show that you read everything and you know everything. Not correct. What I would suggest is have it in layers. Every slide should only have a main theme. The second slide can have a deeper theme. Let's go back to the example of diabetic ketoacidosis. We're talking about the anion gap. So just like a million studies which have been done on this, you can't put everything there. Pick the top ones from high quality journals and say, okay, these are the main ones that change the impact. Your next slide can be, how do you edit the anion gap for albumin? How do you adjust the sodium for the glucose? So you can go a little deeper into that in your second or third slide. So each set of slides has a particular theme. So you don't have to put everything on one slide. That's one thing to do. Remember, less is more. If you can convey your points in an effective way, you only have 20 minutes. Even if you speak really fast, like how I'm doing right now at 25 words per second, you still only can speak so much. So you want to really slow down. And I think it's important that you realize that people's attention spans are also very, small. It's measured in microseconds, I think now. I'm sure all of you by now in this 20-minute, 25-minute talk, you've checked your phones about 45 times, which may be low because I pointed it out, but you probably usually check it 100 times in 30 minutes. I know I check it a lot, but that's a very common issue. It's a very common thing that happens. Our attention spans are low, and we have to account for that when you're trying to talk to somebody.
I think two of them are very common things and easy solutions, sir. The last question was, I think, do we have any courses or maybe kind of train? You pointed one, the Toastmaster. So do you have anything else, and do you have anything on?
There are many TED Talks on generally public speaking and confidence. If you watch enough TED Talks, you'll know how good speakers speak. There's one particularly one by Amy Gallo, Gallo. She talks about how to be fake it till you make it, she says. So you essentially have to be confident in a setting where you're not usually present. So if you're giving a talk or something, you can use that. And two of the techniques I mentioned of keeping your hands like that and all techniques. What it also does is it activates you in terms of it's a kind of an evolutionary response where you're kind of looking up ahead, the chest ahead. So that's actually an automatic stance of the hunter. So you kind of get into this mode of confidence just by doing that. So those are some of the simple tips that you can take forward.
Thank you, sir. I think that would be the conclusion of the talk. Thank you so much for taking your time, sir. I think the student must have been really beneficial. This talk will be available on the ISCCM Hyderabad, both the website, the upcoming website, and the YouTube as well, and the Facebook. Would like to hear from you more from the future whenever you're free. Thank you so much, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Deepak, for the opportunity. Thanks, for the students for listening in. Thank you, Rupsa, for allowing us to
Thank
do
you.
this.